We are in the middle of the 8th century. The Arab-Muslim Caliphate reels under the Abbasid revolution to the south. In the east, the Second Göktürk Empire has fallen, replaced by the ascendant Uyghurs in Mongolia. To the west, the Khazars solidify their Turkic dominance in the Caucasus. And here, amid these shifting powers in the Syr Darya basin north of Persia and south of Kazakhstan, 24 Turkic tribes sense their opportunity. Having served under various overlords for centuries, these tribes unite to form a new state, positioning themselves to control vital trade routes between east and west. Their tale transcends mere nomadic warfare, as it is the foundation for empires that would rule the Islamic world for nearly a millennium. The Seljuks, the Karamanids, the Koyunlu and the Ottomans, among others. But opportunity always comes with risks and challenges. Away from the prosperous Silk Road and wedged between the arid lands around the Aral and Caspian seas, traditional agriculture is unsustainable. Thus, the Oghuz, also called Gus or Uzes in some sources, turn to what they know best: warfare. Skilled horsemen and master archers, they range across the western steppes, soon catching the attention of the Abbasid caliphs, who recruit them as elite bodyguards and soldiers. Some of these Turks frequent raids into Khazar territory and into the Balkans, others even become rulers in distant Egypt. Yet, over time, these disciplined nomads became ambitious, eager to expand their influence and thus setting the stage for a dramatic shift of power that would soon reverberate across the Near East. Out of the empires that emerged within the next 700 years, a few main polities survive to this day. Turkmenistan in Central Asia, Azerbaijan in the Caucasus, and the Republic of Turkey in Anatolia and Thrace. Together with the Gagauz people in Moldavia, these are the descendants of the 24 Oghuz tribes that this episode is about. Despite its far-reaching influence, the Oğuz Yabgu State remains a story largely untold. How did these 24 tribes unite under one banner? What drove them from their ancestral homelands in the Altai Mountains? How did their political and geographic organization shape medieval history? And how did their Great Migration spark a chain of events that would forever reshape the Islamic and, in a broader sense, the Turkic world? As we continue our journey through the grandest era of steppe history, we unravel the epic saga of the Oghuz Turks and, with them, the legend of Oghuz Khan himself, the mythic ancestor of all great Turkish dynasties to come.
This documentary presents historical events based on extensive research and available evidence. While Khan's Den always strives for accuracy, interpretations of history may vary. Viewers are encouraged to engage in further study and draw their own conclusions.
Before we delve into the Oghuz' history, we should take a look at the name, Oghuz. So far it was pronounced as Oğuz instead of Oghuz. This pronunciation stems from the late medieval Turkish language where the letter G became silent basically, but kept in writing today by using the soft G letter. This means that words like Oghuz or Kagan are stretched when spoken. Oghuz becomes Oğuz, Kagan becomes Khan, and so on. However, the Oghuz or Oğuz were known by other different names. Gus, mostly in Arabic and Persian sources, and as the Uzes in Byzantine or Russian sources. Both Gus and Uz designate the same people, perhaps different tribes which did, however, stem from the Oğuz Yabgu State. The history of the Oghuz begins in the heart of Inner Asia, and it was literally carved in stone there. The Orkhon inscriptions, those ancient monuments of the Göktürks that we've explained so very often on this channel, speak of both friend and foe. And among them, the Oghuz feature prominently. During the Second Göktürk Empire, Bilge Khan and his brother Gültekin were the ruler and commander-in-chief respectively. Being sons of the legendary Ilteriş Khan, who liberated the Turk people from Chinese oppression in 681 AD, their job was to make sure the Göktürk state, the second in all of history, thrived. But their rule was not without problems. Both brothers later received their own inscriptions in which the history of the tribes of the Göktürk Empire is also mentioned. In the Kültegin inscription, dated to 742 AD, we find the Oghuz name repeated throughout the text, many times actually, revealing a complex relationship with the Göktürk rulers. In it, Kültegin also laments the mistakes of his ancestors of the first Göktürk state, specifically of the later period in which Göktürk rulers became submissively to foreign powers while the common people let themselves be exploited.
From that moment on, the brother was no longer like his older brother. The son was no longer like his father, and the ignorant Khan became the ruler. The evil Khan consolidated his position. His command was indeed ignorant and malicious, because his chiefs and tribes were unjust, because the Chinese tribes were evil, deceitful and insidious, because they incited brother against brother, and made the chiefs and tribes their minions. The Turks lost both their country and their Khan. For the Chinese tribes, the boy who grew up to become a man became a servant, and the girl who grew up to become a woman became a concubine. The Turk lords abandoned their Turk names, took Chinese names, and pledged allegiance to the Chinese emperor. For 50 years, he, the Turk, worked tirelessly for the foreigners. In the east, where the sun rises, he advanced as far as Korea. In the west, he marched as far as the Iron Gate. He fought for the Chinese emperor and gave up his empire and his tradition. The tribes of the Turk lands merely said, "I once had a great nation. Where is my nation now? To whom can I give the rule over a territory? I was a tribe with a Khan. Where is my Khan? To which Khan should I now give my labor and power?" He said nothing else and grew fat for the Chinese emperor. The Turk was a prisoner again because he was fat and could not get himself together. The Chinese emperor, on the other hand, said that he would kill and wipe out the Turk tribes, never thinking that they had devoted so much diligence to him and provided him so much power. The Turk was to become extinct.
Grim times. But thankfully, Göktengri put Ilterish Khan and his wife İlbilge Hatun on the throne according to this inscription and let them liberate the Turks from the Chinese. In order not to repeat the same mistakes and make themselves submissive to the Chinese, the rulers of the Second Göktürk Empire were thus, well, more cautious and strict. Bilge Khan and Kültegin forced unity among the tribes for a combination of military success, strategic alliances, and a shared cultural identity rooted in Turkic traditions. Yet, despite these efforts, the empire faced recurring rebellions and power struggles. This brought them into massive conflict with the tribes, most of which were Turkic as well. Here, the Tokus Oghuz group comes into play. The text goes on to detail specific battles.
The Tokus Oghuz people were my own people, as heaven and earth were troubled, because their hearts became envious. They became hostile. In 1 year, I waged war along 4 roads. The first I fought at Tol Balak, where we swam across the Tola River. The second I battled at Anderu. There I vanquished his warriors and seized his land. The third I fought at Chushbasha, making the Turk tribes tremble.
Tokus, or modern Dokus, is the Turkic word for 9. Thus, the Tokus Oghuz name indicates that the group consisted of 9 tribes, as a sort of Turkic federation, autonomous, but subjugated into the Göktürk realm. Chinese sources identify the 9 Tokus Oghuz tribes specifically. The Huihe, or Uyghur, Pugu, Hun, Bayegu, Tongluo, Sijie, Kibi, Abusi, and Gulunvugusi. Indeed, they had taken part in the conquest of the First Göktürk Empire in 640, alongside the Chinese Emperor Taizong's campaign into Ötüken. Then the Tokus Oghuz occupied the territory of the Göktürks in captivity and the Altai Mountains, the Göktürks' former home base. So the Tokus Oghuz had good relations with the Chinese and bad relations with the First Göktürk Empire. That is why Ilturish Khan distrusted and even confronted them, and so did his sons Bilge and Kültegin. The Tokus Oghuz were the first group within former Göktürk territory that the brothers, led by Iltadish's brother and successor Kapgan, their conqueror in Old Turkic, attacked and decisively defeated. Every time the Tokus Oghuz revolted, the Göktürks struck back. Bilge and Kültegin subjugated them over and over again. Then the tides turned. With the death of Bilge Khan in 734, centralized control weakened dramatically. Rival factions surfaced among the Göktürk aristocracy, while external pressures from other tribal confederations grew. These internal fractures, coupled with the relentless push by the also Turkic Basmil, Karluk and especially Tokus Oghuz coalitions, culminated in the Göktürk downfall around the year 744. For the Oghuz and other subgroups, this collapse meant both liberation from Göktürk overlordship and the sudden loss of a unifying imperial framework that had long kept regional conflicts in check. From the east, the Uyghurs, as the leading group of the Tokus Oghuz, swiftly rose to fill the power vacuum. Their leader, Kutluk Bilgeköl, led the coalition that deposed the Göktürks, establishing what would be known as the Uyghur Khaganate. The Uyghurs extended influence over former Göktürk domains from Mongolia's Orkhon Valley to parts of the eastern steppe, consolidating control over crucial trade arteries. In doing so, they effectively created a new political orbit that various Turkic tribes, including segments identified as Oghuz, had to navigate. These tribes, the subject of this episode, were not the same tribes called Tokus Oghuz by the Göktürks. In fact, the Turkic group that would create the Oğuz Yabgu State was not explicitly mentioned in the inscriptions as a separate people. And yet, they were featured prominently, because Bilge Khan referenced them several times whenever he addressed his people, the Turk people of future generations, in his most famous quote,
"Turk Oghuz lords, my people, listen. If the blue sky above does not fall down, if the brown earth below does not crumble, who could possibly destroy your lands and the traditions? Turk people, shiver and come to your senses."
It is a bit tricky to figure out, but Oghuz or Oghuz in this context means tribe as much as society. It is likely that Oghuz in general designated any group of Turkic peoples that resided within the core vicinity of the Göktürks. This includes the 9 Oghuz tribes to the east, the Oghuz to the west, and their own core dynasty, the Ashina, at the center of the Altai mountain region. This theory is further supported by the fact that the Bilge Khan referred to the Tokus Oghuz as "my own people." Well, he never called the Kyrgyz or other distant Turkic tribes as his own, although they spoke the same language and had the same traditions as the Göktürks. So in a sense, the Oghuz of our story do appear in the Orkhon inscriptions. They were very much present in the vicinity of the Altai region. What is missing so far is their tribal composition, in contrast to the Tokus Oghuz, who are at least deciphered in the Chinese sources. So these Western Oghuz, our Oghuz, appear to have sought new opportunities farther west, leveraging their military prowess to negotiate or resist external control. Remember that all of the peoples, tribes and nations mentioned so far, spared the Chinese, were Turkic. Unity among the Turkic peoples though died with the downfall of the Göktürks. The westward movement was spurred by specific political pressures. The Karluk confederation pushed them from the east, and you might remember that the Karluks also created the Karamanid Empire sometime later. Thus, the Oghuz were forced to move into the Syr Darya basin around 750 AD. They were fleeing from various threats by both Turkic rivals, and indeed their full migration took not decades but just 6 years. Arriving at the Aral Sea, they founded a new state, and by that I mean a real, structured polity. Perhaps with fluctuating borders as with all other steppe polities, but sedentary states like that of the Arabs, Chinese or Romans did not control every square mile of their territories either. It just happens that steppe polities were more loosely defined, and borders were often drawn along natural barriers, rivers, lakes, forests and mountains. Meanwhile, to the west of the Syr Darya basin, events unfolding in the Islamic heartlands offered another significant avenue for Turkic participation in broader geopolitical affairs. The Abbasid revolution of 751 AD toppled the Umayyads, thereby ushering in a new era of governance from Baghdad. Historical chroniclers such as Al-Tabari and Al-Yaqubi note that the Abbasids soon turned to Turkic soldiers, among them contingents of Oghuz origin, for their famed cavalry skills. Although detailed references to the Oghuz in these early Islamic sources are sparse, indications are that some Turkic groups from Central Asia were already drifting towards the Caliphate, seeking service or patronage under the Abbasids. This shift would have profound effects on the political balance in Transoxiana and beyond. In the Caucasus region, another Turkic polity, the famed Khazar Khaganate, was consolidating influence along the Volga and around the Caspian corridor. Their strategic location let them tax and control key trade routes stretching between Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. The Khazars, too, were open to alliances or enmities with their Turkic kin. The Oghuz, in their early confederative stages, would one day engage with the Khazars either in commerce or in conflict as they expanded their own horizons. Within this atmosphere of turmoil and opportunity, the Oghuz were not a single monolithic tribe, but rather a network of clans, sometimes described collectively as 24 in later records such as the medieval Dede Korkut narratives and works attributed to Mahmud al-Kashgari. At this mid-8th century juncture, though, their confederation was in embryonic form, influenced by precedent imperial structures but also shaped by local constraints and rivalries. Some clusters of Oghuz may have mingled with other Turkic communities, while others might have migrated in search of better pastures, evading both Uyghur dominance and the shifting politics of the Western steppes. And so, by the late 740s and early 750s, the entire Central Asian landscape was marked by disjointed power blocks. The collapse of the Göktürks, as recorded in the Orkhon inscriptions, was more than a mere dynastic upheaval. It was a dismantling of the political core that had historically regulated the steppe. With that regulating force gone, local leaders and emerging confederations had to chart their own destinies. The Oghuz were among those who seized this moment. Echoing in the background of the inscriptions, they would soon emerge from the margins, unifying their various sub-tribes and laying the groundwork for what would eventually become known as the Oghuz Yabgu State. Thus, the mid-8th century was not simply a time of random chaos, but a consequential moment where multiple dominoes fell in quick succession. Uyghur ascendancy in Mongolia altered steppe politics in the east. The Abbasid revolution recalibrated power structures in the Islamic world. The Khazar Khaganate remained a force in the Caucasus, shaping trade and diplomatic relations across Eurasia. And in between these centers of influence, the Oghuz forged their identity amid political upheaval, referencing a shared Turkic heritage. Evidenced tangibly by their mention in the Orkhon inscriptions and looking toward a future where they might rise as major players. This was the fertile, if volatile, ground from which the Oghuz Yabgu State would eventually emerge. It's time we turn inward and explore some tribes that constituted this unique polity. Perhaps the most comprehensive medieval source we have on this tribal makeup is Mahmud al-Kashgari's monumental work from the late 11th century, the Divan Lugat al-Turk, Compendium of the Turk dialects. Al-Kashgari meticulously listed the Oghuz tribes, classifying them explicitly into two main branches: the Üç-ok, literally meaning free arrows, and the Bos-ok, or grey arrows. Each branch constituted 12 tribes, making a total of 24 tribes forming the core of Oghuz society. According to his records, the Bos-ok and Üç-ok tribes each carried distinct tamgas, tribal emblems, used both as marks of identity and as practical means of marking livestock and territory. These symbols reinforced tribal loyalties, facilitating social cohesion as well as ensuring order during seasonal migrations across the steppe. Now, we won't delve into the history of all 24 tribes because we already did that in a previous explained video. Take a look at that one by clicking on the I button in the upper right corner. But there were 6 Oghuz tribes whose foundation, migration and rise led to the creation of 5 important Turkish empires, most of which I mentioned in the beginning of this documentary. The Kınık for the Seljuk Empire, both the Afshars and Salur for the Karamanid Beylik, the Yıva for the Koyunlu, the Bayundur for the Koyunlu, and lastly, of course, the Kayı for the Ottoman Empire. And we begin with the Denizhan branch. The Kınık. The Kınık tribe gained renown as the founding lineage of the Seljuk Empire. In Oghuz origin legends, Kınık is listed among the 24 tribes classified under the Üçok branch, but historically it was part of the Oğuz Yabgu State centered near the Aral Sea. Interestingly, it was situated at the very bottom of each historical list that we have at hand. In the late 10th century, the Kınık leader Dukak, also called Tokak, served the Khazars as a mercenary. But after the collapse of the Khazar Empire, Dukak had to realign his priorities and took service under the Yabgu, but grew influential in his own right. Tensions arose between the Yabgu and Dukak's son Seljuk Bey, leading the Kınık clan to break away from Yabgu authority. Seljuk's faction seized the town of Jant on the Syr Darya and converted to Islam, an event that weakened the Oğuz Yabgu State from within. It is possible that before, the Kınık used to be Jewish, influenced by their former Jewish Khazar overlords. By the 11th century, the Kınık-led Oghuz, under Seljuk's grandsons Torul and Çağrıbek, migrated further west. They defeated the Ghaznavids at Dandan and established the Great Seljuk Empire, a Sunni Muslim power spanning Khorasan, Persia, and later Anatolia. The Seljuk sultans proudly proclaimed their Kınık tribe ancestry. Contemporary chronicles and later works like Abu al-Ghazi's Sajara-i Tarikama record that the Seljuks declared, "We are of the Kınık tribe of the Turkmens," when they rose to supremacy. After the empire's decline, most Kınık Turks migrated into Anatolia, especially in the 13th century amid Mongol pressures. Dozens of Anatolian villages bore the name Kınık, reflecting the tribe's wide dispersion. Though the Kınık did not form a named beylik of their own in Anatolia, their legacy persisted through the Seljuk Dynasties, the Great Seljuks and the Seljuks of Rum, and the general Turkmen population that descended from them. The Yıva. The Yıva are listed by Mahmud al-Kashgari among the core Oghuz clans. Medieval genealogists such as Rashid al-Din and Abul Ghazi included the Yıva in the Üçok wing of the Oghuz. A portion of the Yıva, led by a chief named Süleyman Shah, moved from the Syr Darya region into western Iran and upper Mesopotamia. Süleyman Shah established his base at Bahar, near Hamadan in Iran. This Yıva faction became entangled in the wars following the Mongol onslaught. The presence of a Yıva leader in such a high position suggests that Yıva Turkmens had integrated into the military elites of the region, possibly serving the Seljuk successors or local lords in Iran and Iraq. By the early 14th century, Yıva groups had established a firm foothold in eastern Anatolia, controlling areas around Lake Van and Mosul. The Yıva tribe's most significant political legacy came with the rise of the Koyunlu. The ruling dynasty descended from the Yıva tribe, specifically from the Baharlu clan of Yıva. Under leaders like Kara Yusuf, the Koyunlu established a Turkmen dynasty that ruled over parts of Iran, Azerbaijan, and eastern Anatolia, and often clashed with Timurids and, of course, the Koyunlu in the east and west respectively. Gökhan branch, the Bayundur. The Bayundur tribe is best known for leading both the Gökhan branch of the Üçok as well as the Koyunlu polity in the 14th and 15th centuries. Originally, the Bayundur were part of the Central Asian Kemik Kıpçak Federation before joining the Oğuz Yabgu allegiance. Under the Oghuz Yabgu State, the Bayundur did not feature as prominently as some other tribes in recorded events, but like others, they migrated west in stages. Some Bayundur groups accompanied the Seljuks into Persia and Syria, while others remained on the steppes. Medieval sources note the Bayundur tribe split, with portions merging into Kipchak groups by the 11th century. By the 14th century, the Bayundur had emerged as the leading tribe of the Koyunlu, literally those with the white sheep in Turkish. They constantly clashed with their rivals, the Koyunlu, meaning those with the black sheep. As was the case in the Khazar and in the Kipchak videos, we must take note of the terms white and black, designating the socio-political hierarchy within Turkic societies. The white group constituted the elite, while the black group, the common people. But if this distinction can also be made out in the Ak and Koyunlu dichotomy is uncertain. The Koyunlu state most certainly descended from the Bayundur, as it was called Bayunduriye in Timurid, Safavid, and even Ottoman records. Its sultans, notably the great Uzun Hasan, claimed descent from the legendary Bayundur Khan, the grandson of Oghuz Khan in lore, to bolster their legitimacy. Under Uzun Hasan, the Koyunlu conquered large parts of Persia and Anatolia in 1466 and 1467, while simultaneously bolstering a century-long alliance with the Orthodox Christian Empire of Trebizond. The Komnenoi dynasty of Trebizond and the Bayundur dynasty of the Turkmens were related by marriage since the foundation of the Turkmen state in the year 1340 under Tur Alibek. Thus, just as the Ottoman Empire expanded into the Balkans in the west, the Bayundur became a major power to the east of Anatolia. Uzun Hasan inherited the title Shahanshah, the King of Kings of Iran, from the Timurids, thus ending any ambitions of restoring the empire of Amir Timur. He further welcomed fellow Oghuz tribes into his realm. In a 1470 letter, he asserted that Turkmen from the Bayundur and Bayat tribes, formerly of Mangishlak, Kharazm and Turkestan, had come to serve at his court. He even adopted the Bayundur tribal tamga, the seal, as the emblem of his state. After the Koyunlu fell to the rising Safavids in 1501, whose ruler Shah Ismail was Uzun Hasan's grandson, Bayundur remnants were absorbed into other Turkmen groups. They founded the Bos Ulus, the Grey Nation, or Steppe Nation, a semi-autonomous state within the Ottoman Empire, with its inhabitants roaming from the Caucasus into modern-day Syria. There is little dispute about the Bayundur's role in the Koyunlu state. Both medieval and modern historians concur that the dynasty's founding family was of Bayundur stock. Any minor inconsistencies, such as variations in Bayundur Khan's lineage and epic versus official genealogy, are attributed to the tribe formulating its genealogy as it transitioned from tribal leadership to sultanate. Leading the Dahan branch is the Salur tribe, which was one of the most prominent Oghuz tribes. Medieval geographers ranked them among the largest and most warlike clans as well. Arabic, Persian and Byzantine sources converge on the Salur as one of the most powerful Oghuz groupings on the Syr Darya in the late 9th century. Roman Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitus records that the Oghuz, allied with the Khazars, delivered a decisive blow to the Pechenean Confederation. A modern UNESCO critical survey notes that the tribe of the Salur played an active part in the struggle. Their camps lay at Kasikurt and the Badam River. This victory opened the lower Syr Darya and Aral steppes to Oghuz control and cemented Salur prestige. This is the reason why Rashid al-Din later remarks that, for a long time, Oghuz sovereignty rested in the Salur branch. When Tuğrul and Çağrıbek of the Kınık Seljuk dynasty moved west in the 1040s, a Salur chief rendered Salgur in chronicles rode with them. His great-grandson Sunkur bin Maudud captured Shiraz in Iran in 1148 and founded the Salgurid Atabeks of Fars, who reigned until 1282. This Salur dynasty patronized Sadi, one of the greatest poets of the Middle Ages, and left a marble, congregational mosque and brick citadel that still dominate modern-day Shiraz. Other Salur groups followed the Seljuk tide into Anatolia and eventually crystallized as the Karamanid Principality, or Karamanid Beylik. Ottoman-era genealogists trace Karaman Bey and his father, Nure Sufi, to the Karaman branch of the Salur, and contemporary chroniclers describe how Karamanid forces captured Konya, or Ikonia, in 1276. The next year, Mehmed of Karaman issued his celebrated edict making Turkish the language of government, the earliest known state decree of its kind. It said that no other language except for Turkish was to be spoken at the court, in the streets, or in any public buildings. Controlling the Taurus passes from Konya, Ermenek, and Larende, the Karamanids coined their own money, brokered alliances with Mamluks, Koyunlu, and Hungarians to check Ottoman advance, and fought a running war with the Ottomans. That is, until Bayezid II abolished the Beylik in 1487 and resettled many Salur Karaman nomads in Rumelia, in Thrace, and in Syria, a typical Ottoman tactic to disperse potential rebels to their rule. In the 14th century, another offshoot crossed the Pamirs, now to the east. Their descendants are the Muslim Salar people of China's Qinghai Gansu Plateau, whose Turkic speech still preserves Oghuz features to this very day. They number around 200,000 people. Lastly, the Kayı. According to the sources, the name Kayı meant strong or mighty. A saying even proclaimed the Oghuz people should be led by the Kayı and Bayat tribes, highlighting their role as natural leaders. Whether that is really true or was added later on to legitimize the Ottoman dynasty among the Turkmen tribes of Anatolia is unclear. Even before the fall of the Oğuz Yabgu State, some Kayı groups drifted northwest into the lands of the Rus, while others followed the Seljuk armies into Persia and Anatolia much later. Their presence lives on today in at least 27 villages across Anatolia named Kayı. When the Mongols invaded in the early 1200s, more Turkmen, including Kayı bands, fled further west. One group, led by Süleyman Shah, settled near Ahlat, but after he drowned in the Euphrates, his son Ertuğrul took charge. Ertuğrul entered Seljuk service under Sultan Alaaddin Keykubat, who granted him winter pastures on Karacadağ and frontier lands around Söğüt and Domaniç in modern Bursa province. There, Ertuğrul held the borderlands until about 1280, when his son Osman succeeded him. With Seljuk power weakened after their defeat by the Mongols in 1243, Osman began to expand into Byzantine Bithynia. Around 1299, he declared himself an independent bey and laid the foundation of what would become the Ottoman state. The rest is basically history. Much has been said about the Ottoman Empire, and I even made 2 videos about them. One about the mysterious Kayı origins, and another one that provides a general overview of the empire from a Turkish perspective. Check both of them out on the channel tab. 15th century chroniclers such as Yazıcısade Ali, Aşıkpaşazade, and Neşri later claimed the dynasty descended from the Kayı, even stamping the Kayı Tamga on coins and banners. But earlier sources, like the 13th century Seljuk historian Ibn Bibi and some 14th century Ottoman works, make no mention of this tribal link. Modern scholars now believe the Kayı origin story was shaped in the mid-1400s to strengthen the Ottomans' claim to ancient Turkic lineage. While it's possible that Kayı clans did settle in Anatolia, the lack of contemporary evidence means the Ottoman-Kayı connection remains a debated tradition. When speaking of the Oghuz people, it is mandatory to address one of the most captivating aspects of their identity, the legend of their mythical common ancestor, the man who gave this people their name, Oghuz Khan. His story was passed down through generations in oral traditions, preserved notably in the epic narratives of the Book of Dede Korkut, as well as recorded by later historians like Rashid al-Din. In the Oghuz epic, Oghuz Khan is portrayed as a heroic conqueror and unifier who brings together scattered Turkic tribes under his rule, establishing a tradition of military prowess, nomadic honor, and tribal solidarity. He has 6 sons and names each of them as you saw in the table of the Oghuz tribal branches. The Oghuz Turkic peoples revere Oghuz Khan as their mythical ancestor, yet historians and scholars have long noted remarkable parallels between Oghuz Khan's story and the tale of Modu Chanyu, also called Metehan and originally called Bagatut, the famed founder of the Xiongnu Empire in 209 BC. The parallels are striking. Both Oghuz Khan and Modu Chanyu are depicted as having tense relationships with their fathers, leading to the killing of their fathers to secure power. Oghuz kills Khazar Khan after a plot against him, while Modu orders his warriors to shoot his father, 2 men, during a hunt. Oghuz Khan unites Turkic clans into a cohesive force, forming a special warrior band from 40 sons of Turkic Beks. Similarly, Modu Chanyu centralizes power by unifying the Xiongnu tribes, creating a powerful new empire. Both figures are credited with vast military campaigns, and believe it or not, but in the epic, Oghuz and his sons conquer regions like Turkestan, but also India, Iran, Egypt, Iraq, and Syria, while Modu expands the Xiongnu Empire from the Liao River to the Pamir Mountains and Lake Baikal in the west. Oghuz is guided by a grey wolf, an avatar of Tengri, during his campaigns. Modu's narrative includes his heroic escape from the Yuezhi, which enhances his reputation as a divinely favored leader. Oghuz is born with supernatural traits, speaking immediately and growing to adulthood in just 40 days. Modu, while not explicitly supernatural, is described as a gifted child who quickly rises to prominence. Lastly, both men challenge powerful neighbors. Oghuz declares war on Urum Khan, who stands for the Romans, while Modu defeats the Donghu, Yuezhi, and pressures the Chinese Han dynasty. So could it be that the legend of Oghuz Khan represents a Turkic retelling, adapted, transformed, and infused with Turkic cultural motifs of Modu Chanyu's earlier story? The answer, though uncertain, highlights how historical memory, mythology, and oral traditions profoundly shape the Oghuz people's identity. Another integral figure in Oghuz history is Bayundur Khan, a man portrayed as the paramount leader of the later Oghuz Turks in the Book of Dede Korkut. He serves as the supreme Khan of all Oghuz tribes, presiding over gatherings of the Oghuz nobility and providing a unifying figure for the epic's disparate heroes. In the tales, Bayundur Khan often convenes grand feasts or councils that frame the action, and he dispenses justice and rewards. For example, after one hero rescues his father from enemies, Bayundur Khan grants him a principality as a reward for valor. Symbolically, Bayundur Khan represents the ideal of strong central authority and Oghuz unity. The text frequently references the land of the Oghuz Eli, under his rule, a concept signifying the collective homeland of the Oghuz people in contrast to foreign and infidel lands. Indeed, in reality, the Koyunlu ruler Usun Hasan explicitly styled himself as an, and I quote, honorable descendant of Oghuz Khan and his grandson Bayundur Khan, end of quote. By featuring Bayundur Khan as a wise and powerful overlord of the Oghuz, the text reinforces the notion that the Bayundur lineage is destined to lead. This, for one, glorified the ancestors of the Koyunlu rulers, but it also helped construct a shared Oghuz identity that could unite various Turkish clans under one banner long after the migration period, against the Ottomans, whom Usun Hasan accused of having forgotten the old Oghuz ways. In the windswept steppe stronghold of Yenikind, the new city, the Oghuz ruler held court beneath the billowing roof of his grand yurt, bearing the ancient title of Yabgu. Unlike a Kagan or Khan claiming universal empire, the Yabgu was a paramount chief or viceroy, sovereign over his confederation, yet acknowledging a higher imperial dignity elsewhere. In the earlier Göktürk and Uyghur Khaganates, Yabgu designated a prince governing a western province, and by adopting it, the Oghuz signaled deliberate continuity with Turkic imperial tradition. By the 9th to 10th centuries, Muslim geographers like Ibn Khordadbeh and travelers such as Ibn Fadlan recognized Yabgu as the distinctive title of the Goose King, hence the name Oğuz Yabgu State. Supporting the Yabgu was a refined court hierarchy. His deputy, the Kudarkin, acted as second in command. Beneath them, tribal custom and councils kept authority in check. Dynastic order appeared in the titles of his family. Heirs were called Inal, literally prince, each entrusted to an Atabek, literally father-lord, tutor, while his chief wife bore the honorific Hatun title. These offices, Yabgu, Kudarkin, Inal, Atabek, Hatun, reveal a sophisticated nomadic monarchy far from a loose horde where tradition and collective will uphold a stable, orderly state. The Oghuz were famed for their cavalry. Ibn Fadlan marveled that some chiefs owned 10,000 horses and 100,000 sheep, each herd backing a warrior's might. To harness this force, the Yabgu appointed a supreme commander, the Subasha, head of the army, who led a council of tribal warlords. Horsemen answered first to their bek, then to regional commanders, the Kül Erkin, and ultimately to the Subasha or sometimes the Beklerbek, Lord of Lords. This tiered chain united cavalry wings, right, center, and left, in classic step formation under titles like Ulukbek, Great Lord, for overall cohesion. Ibn Fadlan's encounter with Atrak ibn Katakan, likely a Subasha in his story, illustrates the system. The envoy was hosted by this general, not by the Yabgu, showing martial authority flowed through trusted lieutenants. Campaigns against the Khazars in 965 or repeated Pechenek wars attest to the effectiveness of this hierarchy. Tens of thousands of horse archers coordinated by clear command and bound by loyalty and shared booty. So, what remains of the Oghuz? What is their legacy? Their story begins at least in the 7th century AD, when a loosely allied confederation of Turkic clans roamed the steppes of Central Asia under the Göktürk Empire's banner. Semi-nomadic, devoted to Tengri and Umay, and content to be left alone, the Oghuz were, at first, unremarkable among the many Turkic peoples of late antiquity and the early Middle Ages. But unlike many of the Turkic tribes and states we covered on Khan's Den, the Oghuz Turks remained like this for the longest time. It was only around 1000 AD, with the spread of Islam and Sultan Turil's decision to found a Seljuk state in Khorasan, that many tribes began to convert as well and push southward. From Persia, they thundered across Iraq and Syria until they reached the Mediterranean, and then onward into Anatolia. Having served for generations as the slave soldiers of the Abbasid caliphs, Oghuz-descended Seljuks now carved out their own kingdoms, confronting a bewildering array of peoples. By 1100, the Seljuks of Rum had routed Persian and Arab armies, checked the First Crusade, and made former Byzantine heartlands the western frontier of Turkic power. While the Pecheneks and Kumans battled northern foes, the Seljuks of Anatolia facilitated the mass migration of Turkmen tribes south of the Black Sea. But the true legacy of the Oghuz stretches far beyond the Oğuz Yabgu State, the Seljuk realms and the Anatolian beyliks that followed. Over the next 8 centuries, even as dynasties rose and fell, from the Koyunlu and Koyunlu empires to the Karamanids and Abbasids, each drew its leaders and soldiers from Oghuz stock. And then came 1453, the Turkish conquest of Constantinople. Whatever the precise genealogical ties between the Ottoman dynasty and the ancient Oghuz may be, it was Oghuz-bred cavalry that poured through the Bosporus into Thrace and the Balkans. Today's Gagauz in Moldavia and other Turkish-speaking communities across Eastern Europe are living echoes of that migration. Thus, the Oghuz Turks came from humble beginnings as a group of Turkic families fleeing from devastation in East Asia with the most human wish to live in peace at the Aral Sea in Western Asia. But constant invasions and threats forced them to hold their guard. This militarization was much more visible than among any other Turkic peoples. Lastly, despite cultural achievements through the Seljuks, Koyunlu, Koyunlu, Karamanids, Ottomans, and the countless beyliks, as well as the Abbasid Empire, the most important characteristic of the Oghuz Turks was their military prowess. Perhaps that is the reason why, unlike so many other Turkic peoples that migrated west, the Oghuz Turks not only stayed in the provinces they conquered, they upheld their sovereignty, in the process blending Central Asian traditions with local customs, but never losing their identity. Through every shift of faith, language and geography, the spirit of the Oghuz endures. Proof that a people forged on the frontier can leave its mark on the world for 8,000 years and more.